call me a god. You call me a god. You call me a god. You call me a god. Let's go. You call me a god. You call me a god. You call me a god.
Everyone goes and they lose their souls cause they can't control in Gotham. Everyone lies aside for an eye, you will lose your minds in Gotham. Everyone goes and they lose their souls cause they can't control in Gotham. Living in Gotham, living in Gotham, living in Gotham, living in Gotham.
Alright guys, so initially I was going to try to get this review out as quick as possible after I beat the game, get my review out, get my thoughts out, but after seeing all of the feedback on the game, and spoilers, essentially how much everybody hated this game, I thought I'd give it a bit, watch a few more videos, full reviews from not big companies like IGN, in detail to see why people really don't like this game, and then come out and give you my thoughts. And while this is still going to be a review, this is essentially in defense of Gotham Knights. And the best way to do this, since I'm essentially going to be countering every video that's made about this game, is going to be to go through segment by segment and give you my thoughts and kind of the general consensus on that said segment of the game and go from there. So, like any game ever, you have gameplay, graphics, story, and what I'm going to call bugs / performance, right? And, well, depending on the game, those categories' importance differ greatly. Here, a lot of them are going to come into play, and overall what most people think and what I think of the game. So let's start with graphics, perhaps one of the most controversial ones with this game, and this includes the frame rate. And so this was the big talk, I want to say like 2 weeks before the game dropped. Everyone was talking about how the game was going to be 30 FPS on console. And as someone who prefers frame rate over resolution, this bothered me a lot before the game launched. But honestly, after playing through the entire game, spending roughly around 25 hours on it, especially in the cutscenes, you can't really notice it that much. Now, obviously, if you show me 60 or 144 frames next to 30 frames, I'm gonna notice a difference. I'm not saying that there is a difference, because there definitely is. But once you get past that first session, maybe your first 4 or 5 hours, you kind of get over it. Now, this is an example right here where you can notice it. It is noticeable, like I said, especially in the gameplay more than in the cutscenes, but you can get over it, especially if you're just playing this game. If you're not playing anything else, you're not going to notice it as much. Now, if you're switching between, especially on your PC and playing this on your console, maybe you're playing something like Modern Warfare 2 that just launched and this, you're going to notice switching between the two games. But primarily playing this, and especially in the cutscenes, it's not that bad. Now, like with GTA 5, when you're driving, it's shit. You get awful frames. The driving itself is bad, but we'll come back to that in the gameplay section. It's not that awful. Now, is it something that was needed? I don't think so. I talk about a lot in my first impressions video, in my trailer reaction videos, and pretty much every video I've ever made about this game. How they talk about this whole system where you can play independently of the person you're co-oping with, and you can do crimes on your own, and you can do your own progression, and it saves to yourself, blah blah blah, and you go back to your own mode, all of that stuff, right? And they made it seem like a big deal, and they used a bunch of fancy words that made it seem like it was this new system. But really, it's not. I say in those videos that this system would need to be unique and dynamic and exclusive to Gotham Knights, so that way it would at least feel like, yes, you're losing these frames, but you're getting this really cool gameplay system. But you're not. Essentially, all you're losing these frames for, other than a couple of things we'll talk about here in a second, as far as this mechanic goes, is while your friend is doing open world activity A, you can do open world activity B. So this is the big gameplay feature they talked about, hitting the frame rate, and again, that's just part of it. The other part of it is, at least on console, There's no quality mode, there's no performance mode, there's no ray tracing mode. The game is locked in 30 FPS, 4K resolution, or at least the highest resolution you can output on whatever display you're playing on, with ray tracing on. Now, as much as I absolutely love ray tracing and think it's the coolest thing ever, I will take 10 frames over ray tracing, right? It's not needed, it's not something that you're used to, and that's something that I think makes a huge difference. When you're used to 60 FPS, especially if you play a lot on PC, but even on next gen now, when you're constantly playing 4K 60 FPS every single game, and now you're back to 30, it's something that just comes to be expected. Ray tracing isn't to that point where everything has ray tracing. Look at just something that I've reviewed so you can go back and use it as an example, and it's the first thing that pops into my mind. Dying Light 2 has a ray tracing mode that runs and looks like shit other than the ray tracing, right? Do that. Have the option for ray tracing if you really like ray tracing on console, but don't force people to use it if it's going to hinder the rest of the game, especially the frame rate in a fighting type game. Now that being said, does it look really good? Yeah. The resolution is fantastic playing in 4K. All of the textures are really high quality, especially the different suit types when you're switching from metallic to a more leather to different types of suits that flow, and some are hard surfaces and soft surfaces, and it's fucking raining all the time. And there's light and you have fire, and then when ray tracing comes in, something could be on fire and fire's in the puddle, and the fire from the puddle reflects the light onto your suit, and since your suit's metallic, it's bouncing off, and it just looks fucking fantastic. Now, again, I'd take 60 FPS over it, but it does look great, so that is worth saying. Now, as far as graphics go, that's where we're gonna leave it. The next most important thing to talk about is the performance and the bugs. So, first of all, let me address again that I'm playing this on console. Every single game ever that is both on PC and console is always going to have worse problems on PC. So, when I say I didn't have that many bugs, this is addressing the console version. Because I've seen the PC bugs with the Cyberpunk flying cars and a lot of other bugs that carry over to console. For example, using your abilities, not being able to lock on to an enemy type. Not so much a bug, but something that works 50% of the time, right? It doesn't really have any way, except for one or two abilities in the game, as the characters I played at least, to lock on to who you're using your abilities on. So you just end up firing them off into blank space and wasting them. Another one, as you see here, and this isn't exclusive to Gotham Knights, but not being able to interact with things, right? Any type of third-person game where you have to interact with a button or a switch or something like that, you constantly have this problem, or at least I do, where you're too far from the lever, and now you're too close, and you didn't hold A at the right time, and you kept moving while you were pressing A, so now it resets the timer, and just interacting never works in these games, and I don't know what it is about these third-person types of games where you just can't interact with things, but it's a problem here also. And again, this isn't exclusive to Gotham Knights, I just thought I would bring it up. Now, the obvious one that I did have a lot of was crashing, right? I probably had 10 crashes between my friend and I that I was playing with between the entire 25 hours, which isn't awful. I mean, Cyberpunk doubled that in my first, 10 hours of gameplay, but it's not that bad to where you can't play the game, and again, this was on, the first 3 days of launch, but it did have a decent amount of crashes. Now, other less annoying bugs, stuff like starting cutscenes and player names and name tags and symbols for characters being in the cutscenes or not being pulled into cutscenes when you're at the Belfry, and just having the subtitles and dialogue while not actually being in the cutscene itself. Stuff like that, again, doesn't completely break the game, but it is annoying. But like I've said, I really don't have that many bug problems with this game, at least on console, and I'm hoping it's gotten better. Obviously, since launch, most of my reviews when I make these are within the first day to 3 days of the game coming out. For example, my Modern Warfare 2 review I beat the day the game came out. So any patches, anything like that, I've played before them. Same thing here. I beat the game before all of those day one patches, all of the big bug fixes were out. I think literally the same day that I beat it, they tweeted out all of their fixes that they were working on. So that's just my opinion, especially since this review is a bit later than I normally do reviews for new games. If you're getting this for Christmas or something, or gonna get it on Black Friday, a lot of these problems, especially the crashes, those are ones that they fix pretty quickly, or should be ironed out for the most part. Now let's talk gameplay. Now, we're gonna use my vocab word here, your central gameplay loop. What the hell do you do in this game? Now, this is probably a question I should have addressed earlier, not 11 minutes into the video, but I feel like those other things were bigger concerns that other people are talking about. So, what the hell do you do? The game is essentially broken down into 2 or 3 sections of gameplay, right? You have your crimes, which you go out every night with a list of crimes. As you see here, they can be challenges from different people like Lucius Fox or Montoya, or some of the Watcher gangs and stuff like that, and they're essentially stop crimes. And these give you XP, crafting blueprints, rewards, crafting components, styles for suits, all of that good stuff. And then you have your main story. And to progress the main story, 99% of the time, you have to do some sort of investigation, which requires you to do these crimes in order to progress the main story, and that's essentially your progression throughout the game. Everything revolves around these crimes. Now, the crimes can really be broken down into 3 separate categories. So you have what I would call open world activities, which is just a bunch of guys standing around. You beat them up, you interrogate them if you need to do that for one of your challenges or for a side mission or something, and that's it. Then you have your bigger crimes. These are ones that have big logos on the map. There's a certain set number of them each night, depending on how many clues you found about crimes the previous night. And the game's divided into these nights. Every time you go out and do whatever you need to do is considered a night, and then you return back to home base to craft or progress the story or whatever, and the night passes. All this really does is allow the player to collect more clues to get more crimes at the next night at higher difficulties. And so almost all of the gameplay revolves around these crimes, whether it's them robbing a bank, or there's a bomb threat, or vehicle robbery, or the ambulance one that I don't remember what it's called. All of these crimes, again, scale in difficulty to give you crafting components and gear, and we'll get to that in a minute, but they also progress not only main story, challenges, and side missions. Now, different types of challenges and main story content and side missions all revolve around what type of crimes you do, who you interrogate, what kind of clues you get, and you'll get different rewards from them. Now, the main story and side missions are all in interior locations. So you go out, do your night, do your crimes, do whatever you're gonna do, and then you go back, get a cutscene or two, and if you're doing a main story or a side mission arc, you are then transported to an interior location. Every single main story or side mission is in an interior location that is completely separated from the open world. The open world is purely used to allow the player to do crimes, to get crafting gear, and get clues for high-level crimes, to get higher-level crafting gear, and progress the story through getting clues. Now, I've said clues and crimes about 15 times now, but that's what this entire game revolves around, and it is a bit confusing at first, so that's why if it seems like I'm going over it a lot, there's a reason for it. Now, is this bad? Not at first. Well, at first, especially obviously when you do the crimes and all of this stuff for the first time, it's not that bad. But if you're like me and you like to do everything, the game's a bit broken in a way that it doesn't tell the player what is something that can be finished and completed, and what is something that will go on forever. For example, let's take the Harley Quinn side quest line. You have to interrogate people and do crimes, like I've said 15 times now, to get clues to then unlock the main side mission where you go to the interior location, the prison, and do her arc. Now, I have no problem with this. Where I have a problem is within the journal page and how things are laid out. The way that works, the gameplay of it is fine. I mean, it's not anything new or interesting, but fine, it works. But when you go into the journal, you try to figure out what the hell you're gonna do. You have this Harley Quinn side mission, and then you'll have a Lucius Fox side mission. But Lucius's side mission is to craft some melee weapon and a ranged weapon. And you do it and you get rewards, great. But then you go talk to him in the open world and he gives you the same mission. And then you do it and you go talk to him in the open world and he gives you the same mission. I probably crafted a melee weapon and a ranged weapon for him 7 or 8 times before I realized he just is going to infinitely give you this mission over and over and over and over again. So the journal is so confusing, and because it wants to be like in lore and it wants to be like, oh, crimes and contacts and, you know, different 1.13, 1.14, all these different really complicated mechanics and vocabulary to try to make it seem like it's in lore and in system and in game, where they could have just had main missions, side missions, and then another tab for all of the repeatable quests that just give you better gear. But after struggling with it for like 2 hours, I figured it out. Maybe I'm just a fucking idiot, but I figured it out. Now, speaking of gear, let's talk about that. Now, this is where the comparisons to the Avengers game are gonna start. I've made it in every single other video I've made about this game, and I've been trying to hold them off in this video, but this is where you cannot deny that they're practically the same game. Each character is broken down into a suit, a melee weapon, and a ranged weapon. And as you go throughout the world and do all of these crimes and main missions and side missions, you will gain crafting components to make common, uncommon, rare, legendary, and heroic types of gear. Obviously, as you get into those higher rarities, the better they are. Now, along with that, you have elemental effects that go into each weapon, whether it's fire, ice, poison, or lightning. And then you have crafting components to craft said gear. And of course, it can't be anything simple or like a name you can pronounce or a symbol that makes any type of sense. Just like the Avengers game, more comparisons, it's like the green stick or the green circle or this green triangle that you need to craft this certain bit. And honestly, if you play like me and you just do everything, you can just completely ignore this, which I absolutely love, because you'll have enough crafting components to make everything you want, so you don't have to worry about it. But if you're somebody who just does main missions or side missions, and you want to craft certain things, good luck looking at the crafting components and trying to figure out what the fuck is what and finding them all, because it's impossible. But unlike the Avengers game, when you change your components, your melee weapon and your ranged weapon, because technically the suit, while it's a gameplay mechanic here, it's purely cosmetic over in the Avengers game, but here your melee weapon and your ranged weapon is cosmetic. So whenever you get a new melee weapon, for example, your sticks is Nightwing or your guns for ranged weapon is Red Hood, you'll get a new look to them as well, which is something so simple and so, I would think, expected in this type of game that I shouldn't be praising it here, but the Avengers game didn't fucking do it, so I'm praising it here. Now let's talk about the suits. Again, comparing it to the Avengers game, because that's the closest comparison I have. Well, suits are purely cosmetic over there. Here, they are essentially your defense stat. While they have elemental effects here and there, it's essentially how much health will you have, right? And so, this is going to be your biggest cosmetic change. Now, suits are broken down into 3 types, technically. You have those you unlock from just playing the game, those you have to craft, and then styles. So let's start from the beginning. Those you unlock naturally, you don't have to do anything, you don't have to craft anything, you don't have to go look into your challenges, you just play the game and you'll get them. These naturally scale with the level you're at, so you'll always have suits if for some reason you're not doing any crimes or any side missions and you don't have any crafting components at all and you have no way to make suits, the game will give you decent suits to where you won't just be getting absolutely smacked throughout the entire game. Now, the suits you craft, this is where things become a bit more complicated. Obviously, you use crafting components to make different suits that have different styles. Now, there's a set number of styles. I believe it's 12, right? For example, there's a knighthood suit, there's your default suit, there's your year 1 suit, there's your titan suit, there's metal. These are just some of the examples. right? And each one of those suits has 3 cowls, 3 logos, and 3 boots that you can change on them. This is where things get complicated. When you take a suit that you were crafting, it takes one of the pre-made styles that has, again, 3 cowls, 3 logos, and 3 boots, and randomizes each one of those options and creates this suit from that style. And in order to unlock the style itself, you have to craft a suit of that style. So again, just to make it simple, let's say you want the Titan suit, right? For Red Hood, it's a green jacket and a red outfit. If you want that style, you have to craft the suit in that style that's using one of those variants. Essentially, there's 9 options for each suit, and then the base style where those 9 options come from. This is, again, very overly complicated. It shouldn't be this hard, but it is. And that's how unlocking suits and crafting different components and all of that stuff works. It really shouldn't be that complicated, and the suits are really cool, but it's just overly complicated for some reason. Now there's 2 more things I want to talk about, both of them imperative to gameplay. Now, first off, let's talk about the skill tree. I talked about this in my first impressions video, but that was when I had only played about half the skill tree unlocked for one character. After I beat the game, I went back and, to give it a fair shake, played a bit as every single character, looking at their skill trees and their movesets and all of that, their outfits. And so again, comparing it to the Avengers game. The Avengers game, I believe, I haven't played in a while, but has 3 main skill trees and then a mastery set of skill trees. It might just be 1 mastery skill tree, it might be 3, I don't remember. Gotham Knights uses 3 skill trees and a mastery skill tree. The problem and the difference between these skill trees here is that the Avengers skill tree has skills built into it. Now, what do I call skills? Mainly abilities. Now, what the hell is an ability? Let's say you have your gameplay mechanics. Let's say your main attack is X for light attack, hold X for heavy attack, Y for ranged attack, hold Y for heavy ranged attack. Those are the only moves in the entire game. A skill, what I consider a skill, is something new. Now you can do an XXX attack, now you can do a YYY attack. Or the way this game does some of your abilities, you have your RB and A, for example, where you can do a reload takedown, stuff like that. That's fine. Those are abilities. Giving an example from each game, the Avengers game, you can throw your shield as Captain America and then catch it and throw it again. Those are abilities. Those are skills. That's something cool and new that you want to unlock. What you just saw there was a skill. This dome you see, that's a skill. And so I hope what I'm saying makes sense, and that it has to be something new and unique that I can use to where I give a shit about it on the skill tree. For Red Hood, he has about 4 of his, let's call it 25 nodes on the skill tree. Now, more characters have more skills and other characters have less skills. For example, I want to say Batgirl probably had the most unique skills in her skill tree, and she's probably the only character I would consider to have enough skills in the tree. Everybody else has percentages, and I can't tell you how much I fucking hate percentage skill trees, okay? Just don't give me them. I don't care. I don't care if I do 25% more damage to regulators. I don't care if I do 13% more critical headshot damage. I don't give a shit. Give me that passively through the gear that I'm crafting. I don't want to spend my skill points. I don't want to look forward to percentage upgrades. That's not fun. It's not enjoyable. Even if the skill tree is smaller, make the skill tree just 5 fucking nodes. That's fine, as long as they're all skills and abilities, or add more combos to the damn game. For a fighting game, there's not a lot of combos. You can spam X till you run out, throw a hold X in there, spam Y till you run out, hold up Y in there, and then you have, again, the 4 or 5 skills that I've been talking about. That's really it. Throw some combos in there, make it a bit more interesting, right? This game drastically needed a better skill tree. It's really bad, and it's probably the worst part in the gameplay aspect of the game. Now, I've glossed over just the general gameplay, but I feel like I've shown enough of that in the background to where you can get a sense if you're going to like it or not. It's like Avengers, it's kind of like the old Batman games without a counter button. It's a beat 'em up, right? It's not difficult, it's fine, It's not anything new or revolutionary. It gets you from one story point to the next, or unlocking one suit to the next, or whatever your goal may be. It does what it needs to do. Now, I only count boss fights as unique character fights. If it is a enemy type that they're introducing that's bigger or faster, I do not count that as a boss type. So, within the main story, I don't think there's that many boss fights with unique characters. I want to say it's just, spoilers, Bruce Wayne and Talia al Ghul, if you count that as 2 separate boss fights. I don't think there's any other boss fights. Now, side missions, as you see here, there's Mr. Freeze, Clayface, Harley Quinn, and technically I guess you can count Man-Bat. Now, the quality of these boss fights drastically change. The Mr. Freeze boss fight is the most unique, I'll say, but it's the most absolutely fucking annoying boss fight I've ever done in my entire life. I might just be shit, and this is the earliest boss fight, so it's very likely, but I could not get out of the way. He hit me over and over and over and over and over and over again. The Harley Quinn boss fight, and maybe it's just my character, it did seem like I kind of picked the worst character, but she's so fast, I just couldn't hit her as Red Hood. Okay? Now, if you're any other character, you're not going to have that problem. The Clayface boss fight is fine. I mean, it's a super generic boss fight. Don't expect any Elden Ring level unique boss fights here. They all have their tropes where they do the same moveset once or twice, you memorize it, and then you don't get hit and you smack them. If it's later on in the game, maybe they'll have a phase 2 or a phase 3 and they repeat the same process, and that's it. Even the main story boss fights act exactly the same. They're not bad, they're just fine. They do what they need to do. So that's all for the gameplay section. Let's move on to the story, which is going to be relatively short, but I do want to talk about it. Now, really quick plot summary, spoilers, I'm just going to glance over it because it's been long enough to where I can talk about spoilers, and if you care, you know what happens by now. Batman dies, he leaves behind his trainees, Batgirl, Robin, Blue Robin, and Red Robin, and there's some bad guys. You gotta figure out who killed Batman, but in the process of figuring it out, you come across the Court of Owls, a bunch of bad people that just manipulate the government and the city and all of that stuff and do whatever the hell they want, assassinate people, all of that stuff. All the while, the Shadow people, what the fuck are they called? The League of Shadows, they want to kill the Owl people because they're corrupt, and the League of Shadows kills corrupt people, but they like assassinate people and don't care who gets in their way. And so there's your plot. Spoilers, Batman comes back to life and then immediately dies again. So that's dumb, and they do the whole, oh, we can't work together, but we're a family, we gotta work together. It's basically the Ninja Turtles, alright? The red guy is angry, the blue guy is the leader, the orange guy, technically Robin, I'm counting that as orange, he's young and he's dumb, and the purple one is smart, okay? So, there's your, it's the Ninja Turtles, okay? They live in the sewer, alright? It's the fucking Ninja Turtles, that's what this game is, okay? But there's your story. Now, is it the most interesting story ever? Not really. Does it do what it needs to do to get you from one punching people to the next punching people, and for me to just unlock the suits? Yeah, it's fine, right? It's not awful. I wasn't bored. It's decent. Now, what is cool is, depending on who you're playing as, the dialogue is relatively, depending on the cutscene, unique to each character. For example, spoilers, when Batman comes back to life, I'm playing as Red Hood, so he talks about how you've both come back with the Lazarus Pit, and like he's done this, and if he can do it, you can do it, and blah blah blah. And so that's cool, right? You have unique dialogue depending on who you're playing as. Now, cool enough to replay the entire game again and just to get different dialogue as different characters? Absolutely not. So overall, the story does exactly what it needs to do. Are there any big twists and turns? Like, you know Talia's the bad guy from the beginning. I mean, you don't know that Batman's gonna come back to life, but like, once you're getting close to it, it's kind of predictable, so it's fine. Now, I do want to give him props for not using the really generic ass villains. So like, there's no Joker in this game. There's no Bane in this game. So that's nice, right? Not using, like, the big boy name villains is something that at least keeps your game interesting, and you can interact with characters that you don't get to see that much. Now, it does have Harley Quinn and Mr. Freeze and Clayface, and those are all big ones, but the main villains, like especially the Court of Owls, is a lesser known one that's really interesting and can at least offer some new ideas in the Batman universe. Now, that being said, I feel like you have to have a pretty fair knowledge of Batman to keep up here. If you've never played or seen or read Batman, I don't think you can just come into this. I think you'd be very confused, right? Because you have all of these side characters to follow, which I think you could keep up with. The Harley Quinn, the Mr. Freeze, the Clayface, the Man-Bat. That's fine. You could keep up with all of that. Because this is set, you know, Batman's dead, obviously, so years and years and years into the Batman universe. So all of that lore is already established. But you have to have League of Shadows knowledge. You have to know Ra's al Ghul and Talia al Ghul and the history there, as well as like how she's like kind of married to Batman. You have to know what a Lazarus pit is and kind of how that works, because they don't really cover that. They hint to it. There's a lot of knowledge you kind of gotta have to keep up here. And I'm not saying it's impossible if you've never played a Batman game or seen Batman or read Batman, but there's just a lot of stuff, a lot of character connections, a lot of reasons why certain stuff matters, and just knowing the importance and the context of certain characters wouldn't be possible without knowing who they are and why they are important. Again, the League of Shadows is a big one. Right out the gate. Ra's al Ghul, League of Shadows, Talia al Ghul, like literally first mission. All of that connection is just, it's all thrown in there. And if you don't understand why they're linked and why they're important, I can see how that would be confusing. Now, that's just my thoughts. Now we're gonna get into the non-category related stuff, just my petty stuff that I'm not gonna take points off for, but I need to nitpick. The puzzles in this game, S tier, alright? There's one that's really confusing, that if I wasn't playing co-op, I never would have figured out. But this one's pretty good, alright? I want to say there's like probably 5 puzzles. Most of them are not too complicated to where I have to look them up, because I'm not the smartest person out there, alright? If I have to look up your puzzle, it's not enjoyable. I ruined it for myself. Like, I don't get satisfaction out of completing it. This one, I sat here and it was just on the verge of like, I know what I'm doing and being complicated enough to where it was enjoyable. But like, let me show you the one that I just was completely lost. This one, no clue what was happening. Literally got on my phone. This, like, if the puzzles were this level or higher throughout the whole game, I would have brought them up in the gameplay section and the game would have lost points for it. You can't be doing this type of stuff. This was too high tier for me. Alright, there's another one like this where you have to like use the shadows and move the statue. Again, wasn't playing co-op, never would have figured that out. So the puzzles are pretty decent. You know, there's some really good ones and some really bad ones. So that's where I'm gonna even it out here and why I'm not gonna take points off for it. Another thing, the investigations. I don't know whose idea it was. I mean, it's a cool idea. On base level. On paper, it was probably really cool. But with the pace of the game and the way you have to constantly be doing crimes and grinding through stuff to unlock new suits and new gear and new progression and new story and new side missions and constantly doing all this open world stuff and doing the same open world stuff over and over and over and over again, I don't have the time or the patience to sit here and read all of these investigation details to try to figure out what the correct thing is, when it's quicker to just get every single one wrong until you click on the right thing. Now in the main story, there's an exception. In the main story, it's fine, it works, because it has story purposes behind it. It's cool, it does what it needs to do. But as a side mission, this sucked. Final point, and then everybody can go home. Why the hell does Red Hood stand like he's nervous giving a presentation? Why does the dude stand like this? I don't know, it bothered me the whole game. Anytime I activated a cutscene and it was my character instead of Nightwing, the dude, he just looks like he has to present to the class and he's gonna piss himself. I don't understand why he would stand like this. I get it, they're trying to have like a different stance for everybody and not have it look so generic and static, fine. But like, let Robin do this. The dude, I can't. The whole game. Go watch my stream. I streamed the entire game, and this is how he stands, and it bothered me so much. Again, it's something stupid, and I'm just making fun of it because it's funny, but it just looks so dumb. But that's all the nitpicking and everything aside. Let's go ahead and give a final score to the game. Now, the way I've seen other people give scores is broken down into categories. IGN and everyone sat this at about a 5 at average. Then I've seen smaller reviewers give it a co-op and an independent score, which is honestly a good idea, but because of how drastically different I think those scores would be, it's really pointless. I will just say there's no reason to play this by yourself. It's not good. You have to do too much repetitive stuff over again and over again and over again to get all of the content that you want, the suits and the gear and all of that stuff, the different colors for your suits, to where it will not be fun by yourself. But that's just my opinion. So a score playing it as co-op. Now, the final thing I have to factor in is that this is a next-gen game at $75 for about 25 hours. Now, that's a decent and fair amount of content. There is a lot to do here. There's New Game Plus, you can play through it again, play it with different characters, and get different dialogue options and all of that stuff. I haven't unlocked all of the suits, I didn't do all of the collectibles and all of that stuff, so there is more to do. You can put more time into it. So that doesn't really factor into lowering the score at all. So, my final score for Gotham Knights is going to be a 7 out of 10. The negatives, like the frame rate and the repetitiveness of having to do crimes, is really outweighed by graphically how the game looks with the ray tracing and the cutscenes and the customization you can go through, both cosmetic and mechanically from a gameplay sense. With 4 different characters, it all works really well. The only things I would have added here was giving this 4-player co-op. I think you're already taking that 30 FPS hit. You can add more players and probably not suffer too much performance-wise. Now, the final thing I do want to add on as to why that score is so high, because people aren't going to like that score. I've seen 2s for this game. And so, the reason I give that game such a high score is because if you look at something, let's take my most recent review, Modern Warfare. I think I also gave that a 7, right? The Modern Warfare 2 campaign, not the multiplayer, right? If you take the campaign, I can tell you, I can go in, grab missions and segments that don't work, and tell you how to fix them. Now, I can't go into the fucking computer and program it and fix it, but I can tell you how to fix that mission to where it will be at least more enjoyable than it is now. With Gotham Knights, I can't do that. There's no way for you to go through and change the things I don't like. For example, the grind of all of the crimes and the side missions and all that stuff to get gear and suits without redesigning the entire game. Because if you take that stuff out, that stuff that doesn't work, you now have no gameplay. So realistically, I can't think of a better way to do this. And that's why I sit it at a 7 out of 10. If you look at the Avengers game, again, a final comparison to the Avengers game. The Avengers game is essentially the same game, but instead it has worse customization, worse cosmetics, mechanical customization that doesn't change cosmetically, and locations that are so boring that you play over and over and over. There's what? The desert, the snow, and the city in the Avengers game. And you play those same locations over and over and over, whether it's in the main story, or you're doing a side mission, or you're playing in multiplayer, or you're doing a new event, or a new DLC comes out. You play in those same locations over and over and over and over. Here, it's at least unique and distinct locations. But that's just my thoughts on the game. You guys let me know what you think down in the comments below, and I'll see you guys on the next one.